The Baglan Giant. Once upon a time, there was a giant called Pwll, who lived with his wife on top of Baglan Mountain. One day he was sitting on the edge of the mountain fishing for whales in Baglan Bay when he heard two seagulls quarrelling.
Wales is the best country in all the world, and you are very lucky to come here,
said one seagull.
Indeed it is, to be sure. It's Ireland that's the finest country in the world,
said the other seagull.
And if you come with me, then I'll show you. Why should I leave my mountains?
Asked the first seagull scornfully.
Or these seas that are so full of fish, a man could walk on them and not get his feet wet. When I follow the ploughman at the spring ploughing, the worms he turns up are as large as snakes, and the wind in the trees at Afan is as full of sweet music as 1,000 harps. Food and music. Is that all you think of then? We have food and music in Ireland, but we have warriors too, soldiers the like of whom you've never seen, replied the second seagull. But our Welshmen beat them. When Bran the Blessed walked through the water to Ireland, Matholwch, your king, he ran like a frightened rabbit.
The first seagull spread his wings and gave a triumphant screech.
But that was years ago,
said the second seagull, not too pleased with what the other had said.
Why, there are giants in Ireland now, twice as big as Bran, and twice as powerful. There was Finn MacCool and his brothers, and now there's O'Reilly of Connacht. If he breathes too hard, a forest falls down, and if he runs, the earth trembles, and the clouds knock together like thunder.
But by now Pwll had grown angry. Who was this foreign bird who dared to laugh at the giants of Wales? Pwll felt he must uphold his own honour and that of the rest of his family, and he growled in fury. The two seagulls were very frightened. Pwll had been sitting so still, because he was fishing, that they thought he was part of the mountain, but they soon saw that he meant them no harm, and they settled down again on the grey rock.
O'Reilly of Connacht, indeed, growled Pwll. I could beat him with one hand tied behind my back, and one foot tucked behind my ear into the bargain.
Is it you giving a challenge you are? Asked the Irish seagull. For if so, I will take it to him myself, without waiting another minute. Of course, he's giving a challenge, said the Welsh seagull confidently.
Although he was angry, Pwll was a very peaceable as giants go, and he had not meant to do anything as warlike as issuing a challenge to anyone. But when he saw the trusting look of pride in the eyes of the Welsh seagull, he drew himself up, huffed and puffed a little, and then said firmly,
Very well. I challenge O'Reilly of Connacht to a test of strength and skill. The test to be held on Baglan Burrows 3 days from today at noon. And if either of us does not come, he shall be disgraced for ever and a day, and all the giants of his country with him.
I'll take your message at once,
said the Irish seagull, and before Pwll could say another word, it had spread its wings and swooped away out over the water on its way to Ireland. Just then, Pwll felt a tug on his fishing line and found that he had a brace of fat sharks on the end of it. He was so busy landing them that he forgot all about O'Reilly and the challenge. But later on, when he was striding home to tea, he remembered everything that had happened, and he was not at all happy.
Ah, well, perhaps O'Reilly won't come, Perhaps that bird won't find him after all. Or if he does, perhaps O'Reilly doesn't like fighting either, because there's sure to be a battle if he does come, and that's always one of the tests. Oh dear, I wish I'd thought before I spoke." And poor Howell heaved a sigh so deep that 2 pine trees blew over. It wasn't that he was scared, but he was not a very large giant, and he was very much afraid that O'Reilly would beat him, and then all the giants of Wales would be disgraced forever, and that would be terrible indeed. When he got home, he gave the sharks to his wife Sian, and she grilled them with butter until they were as tender as a fresh spring lamb. Then Howell and Sian sat down to eat their tea, and afterwards Howell played his fiddle as they sat outside their front door in the evening sunshine. All the villagers down below on the marshes and in the valleys heard him play and were glad, for he was a fine musician, and his songs were fit for a king's court. Howell said nothing to Sian about O'Reilly, for he did not want to worry her, and when the sun dropped down over Gower and the stars came out, the 2 of them went to bed and slept until the morning. But it did not take long for Sian to guess that there was something wrong. Howell was so miserable that he could neither eat nor play his fiddle, and on the second night he could not sleep either. "Whatever is the matter?" Sian asked him. "Is there bad news? Blight in the potatoes, or beetles in the beetroot?" No, there's nothing wrong," said Howell. "Have you got indigestion then? Those sharks were very rich eating, and with all that butter too," said Sian. "No, I haven't got indigestion," Howell told her. I'm going for a walk." And off he went, and Sian looked after him, and then she crept along behind him, crouching down among the trees so that he could not see her. She didn't like following him, but she was sure that there was something wrong, and she wanted to help if she could. Howell went down to the sea edge, and there he began to practice, running, jumping over the treetops, throwing boulders, all the things that he might have to do when O'Reilly came. He did very well, but every time he tossed a rock 50 yards, he thought to himself, "O'Reilly is sure to beat that." And then his face grew longer than ever. Sian could not make head nor tail of it. Why was Howell doing all these strange things and looking so miserable? At last she decided to go home and ask him again when he came to dinner. By this time Howell was so worried that he soon told her everything. "It's not the tests I mind," he explained. "After all, a few bruises won't do me any harm, and I even enjoy a wrestling match as long as I don't have to hurt anyone. But if I lose the contest, then all the giants of Wales will be disgraced. And if O'Reilly is only half as big as that seagull said, then I couldn't win, not in 1,000 years. Said Sian, knitting away at a new jerking for Howell. "Was it a test of strength and skill, you said?" "Yes, the usual thing. A little running and throwing and jumping, some weightlifting, and a boxing match." Howell grew even more miserable at the thought of it all. "And you can't withdraw, of course?" asked Sian. "Oh, no. O'Reilly would win by default then," said Howell. "But if O'Reilly withdrew, then you would be the winner?" "Certainly, but he won't withdraw," said Howell gloomily. "Just leave that to me," Sian told him. "Now, the contest is the day after tomorrow, so until then you must practice as hard as you can, and I will cook you some special strengthening food to build you up so you can toss mountains and not even notice it." "Very well,"
agreed Howell. He didn't think Sian could help, but he did not like to say so. All that day and the next Howell practised. He threw stones out to sea until the people in Somerset across the water grew worried and sent a salmon to ask him to stop in case he hit their houses. Then he jumped over the tallest trees he could find and across the widest parts of the rivers. Last of all, he ran up and down Baglan Mountain so many times that his feet wore a deep furrow in the hillside. But when he went to bed on the night before the contest, so tired he could hardly eat his supper first, Sian tossed and turned and muttered in her sleep so loudly that Howell could not sleep at all. When the morning came, he was exhausted. Sian made him a cauldron full of porridge for breakfast and insisted that he ate it all up. "Or else you'll never be strong enough to beat O'Reilly," she told him.
"I don't want to beat anyone. I just want to sleep,"
yawned Howell, propping his eyelids open so that he could see his porridge. "You finish the breakfast, and then go and have a little nap if you like," suggested Sian. "I'll call you when O'Reilly comes, and you'll be nice and fresh for the contest."
"Don't forget to call me,"
said Howell, and he got back into bed and went straight off to sleep. As soon as she was sure that he was fast asleep, Sian crept into the bedroom and took Howell's shoes from under the bed. She carried them out the front door and put them down beside the step. Then she took out her knitting and sat on the bench by the door to wait for O'Reilly. It was not long before she saw someone approaching from the west, his head showing above the rocky hill on the bank of the river Neath. He was certainly a very large giant, and he carried a club made out of an oak tree, which he used as a walking stick. His coat and trousers were green, and on his head he wore a green cap, and despite his bushy black beard, his eyes were merry as he whistled as he walked.
"Good day to you, ma'am,"
he said to Sian as he drew near to the cottage. "Good day, Mr. O'Reilly," said Sian politely. "I'm afraid my husband has had to go on a journey, but he'll be back very soon."
"Indeed," said O'Reilly. "Well, I'm just glad to sit here for a while. It's been a long journey from Cashel."
"Would you like a cup of tea?" asked Sian.
"Not just now, thank you. I drank a lake or two on the way here."
They sat quietly for a while. It was peaceful in the warm sunshine, and the wind blowing gently through the trees, and the bees buzzing round the flowers in Sian's garden.
"Will your husband be long, do you think, ma'am?"
asked O'Reilly after a time. "Well, I can't be sure. He didn't say when he'd be back, but he won't want to miss the contest. I do know that," Sian told him.
"I did get here very early," agreed O'Reilly. "It's only 11 o'clock now."
And so they sat quietly once more, while the sun rose higher in the sky, and the birds sang merrily in the woodlands around them. But after a time, O'Reilly began to grow restless again. He got up and walked around the garden. Then his gaze fell on Howell's shoes, lying still where Sian had put them by the door.
"Are you sure that your husband has gone on a journey?"
O'Reilly asked. "Indeed I am," said Sian, "for if sleep is not a journey, what is?" she thought to herself.
"Then why are his shoes still here? Has he gone walking in bare feet?"
O'Reilly was polite but curious. "Howell's shoes? Do you think these are Howell's shoes?" asked Sian in pretended surprise. "These little things. Don't you know a baby's shoes when you see them?"
"But they're 3 feet long," gasped O'Reilly. "Are they your baby's shoes?"
What a question, said Shan indignantly. Well, if you're asking me next if this jacket is for Howell, and she held up her knitting to show the Irish giant. Is that your baby? I can hear snoring inside your house, asked O'Reilly. He is breathing rather hard, agreed Shan, but he didn't sleep very well last night. The Irish giant sat down again on the bench. He was very thoughtful. Now and then he looked at Howell's shoes, and now and then he looked at Shan's knitting, and at last he got up, stretched, and went over to see what the time on the sundial in the middle of the lawn was. Well, he said, as though surprised. It's 12 o'clock already. I'm very sorry, but I can't wait any longer. I have to meet with the High King of Ireland at the Giant's Causeway by 1 o'clock. I'm sure Howell won't be long now, said Shan. Couldn't you wait just a little bit longer? I'll make a cup of tea. I couldn't possibly wait another minute even, said O'Reilly. But I won't forget the contest. We'll arrange a meeting next year, or if I'm still with the High King, then the year after that. Of course, Howell will be very sorry to have missed you, said Shan politely. O'Reilly did not even look back as he walked away, and Shan was glad of that, for as the Irish giant's head vanished over Kilvey Hill, she heard Howell calling to her from the house. He had woken up at last. Shan picked up his shoes and said to herself, if these were a baby's shoes, then the baby's father would stand as tall as Snowdon. No wonder O'Reilly didn't want to stop. There's not a giant in the world who could fight a man like that. And she laughed to herself as she went in to see what Howell wanted. Howell could not understand why O'Reilly had gone back to Ireland so quickly, but he was very glad to hear the news. Perhaps he will have time to come back next year, he said to Shan. I'm sure he won't, she said, picking up her knitting. And as for the two seagulls who had come to watch the battle, they sat on the garden wall and mewed with laughter. They had known better than anyone, except for Shan, who had won the contest. Elen and the Goblin. Mary Hopkin was the maid at Blaenselzig farm, not far from the source of the River Afan. One afternoon she and her mistress were busy in the kitchen when they found that they needed more water to wash the dishes. Run down to the well, Mary, and fetch a bucket of water, said her mistress. Mary took the bucket and hurried out of the house. She was glad to be out in the warm sunshine, where she could see the green hillsides curving up to the blue sky, and hear the music of the wind in the young leaves above her head as she sang a gay dancing song. She was as happy as the day itself. The well was not far from the house, in a patch of stony ground, and as she came to it, Mary saw something very small and black moving quickly among the stones. At first she thought it was a beetle, then a lizard, then a weasel, and then all of a sudden it was a little man who stood before her. He was smiling at her so cheerfully that though she was very frightened, she did not run away. "Don't be afraid, Mary," said the little man. "Come with me, and I will give you treasures beyond your imagining. Come, gentle Mary." And he held out his hand to her. But at that Mary took fright worse than ever. She was too scared and astonished to speak, but turned and ran away as fast as she could, back to the house, leaving the bucket where she had dropped it. "Oh, mistress, there's a goblin by the well, and he tried to steal me away," she cried as she rushed into the kitchen. "Nonsense," said her mistress sternly, but she sent one of the men to get the bucket and fill it, all the same. "You must go to the well with Mary tomorrow and see what is to be seen," she told her husband that night. The men have other work to do in the fields, and I can't keep asking them to go and get the water." "Very well," said the farmer, and the next day he went with Mary when it was time to draw water from the well. Yet whether it was because Mary had refused the little man's request, or whether it was because the farmer was with her, they saw nothing but the wind in the long grass, and heard nothing but the sheep bleating on the hill. Now a few days later, Elen, the daughter of the farm, came home from a visit to some of the family who lived a little way away. Elen and Mary shared the same room next to Ellen's parents' bedroom, and that night Ellen was full of new stories to tell her friend. They talked very quietly, so as not to disturb the farmer and his wife, hiding their heads under the blankets as they chatted and giggled. "I have a story to tell you too," said Mary at last, suddenly remembering her adventure at the well. "I wouldn't have run away," said Ellen, when she had heard the tale. "I would have gone with the goblin. But you know what they say. If you go with the fairies, they will keep you if they can, in their own country, under the ground. You would never come home again, and if you did, it would only be after so many years that blind Selsig would have crumbled into the dust, and everyone you know would be gone. No more than dust themselves." Mary shivered. "I don't care. They would never keep me," said Ellen proudly. "That's easy to say now, when you're safe at home," Mary told her, annoyed by Ellen's bold words. "Then I'll go to the well myself tomorrow and see what's there to be seen," said Ellen. "Now let's go to sleep. It's late." And so the next afternoon Ellen went herself to the well, but she saw nothing. Still, she was as stubborn as she was beautiful, and so day after day she carried the heavy buckets to the stony ground by the well, filled them, and trudged back to the house. For 8 days she did this, and only saw the sun on the water and heard a lark singing too high up in the sky to be seen. "I will go once more," she told herself, "and that will be the finish of it." Then, on the 9th day, she came up to the well, and she saw someone coming towards her. It was a little man, neither as small as a child nor as big as a man, and he was smiling as he came. "Greetings, Ellen," he said as he walked up to where she stood, the buckets at her feet. "Good day to you, sir," said Ellen politely. "How do you know my name?" "I know most things," the goblin told her, "and that is the least of them. I know too the speech of the birds, and the movement of the creatures within the earth, and the whereabouts of all the treasures in Morganwg." "What treasures are those, sir?" asked Ellen. She was frightened, and yet despite herself she wished to learn what the little man wanted of her. "Wonderful things. Gold and silver and pearls in heaps, and jewels so fine that a queen might wear them and be proud. If you come with me to my country, I'll show you. And there's feasting there, and music, and all that you might ever want." The goblin smiled in such a friendly manner that Ellen almost agreed at once. But then she remembered what happened to those who went with the fair folk, and shook her head. "No, sir, I will not go with you, thank you very much. There's a harp in my palace that plays more sweetly than the best harp ever made in Wales, and those who hear it forget every care and every pain, and I have a dish of pure silver whose gift is such that all who eat from it find what they most desire. Will you come and see them? You shall have an apron full of gold to bring home with you too," said the goblin. "I won't go out of the sight of my house," said Ellen firmly. "But you will not be out of the sight of it at all," the little man promised her. "The entrance to my castle is just over there," and he pointed to a nearby hillside. And at that Ellen decided there could be no harm in going just a little way with the goblin, and so she agreed to his request. They walked for some distance, but Ellen could still see the farmhouse, with the smoke rising from the chimney and the late sun shining from the window panes, and so she was content. At last they came to a big stone lying in the bracken.
"Here is the gate of my palace,"
said the goblin, and he spoke some words in a strange tongue with great ceremony. The stone moved slowly aside, and Ellen was astonished to see a passageway leading into the hillside.
"Welcome to my kingdom,"
said the goblin, and Ellen saw that he was no longer a funny little man in a shabby suit, but the king of the hill, who stood in a golden gateway inviting her to enter.
"If I go into the hill, I won't be able to see my home," she thought.
Yet the spell of the fairy country was too strong, and she followed the goblin into his palace. And at the end of the passage there was a cave. Its walls were covered with the most beautiful tapestries, and from the roof hung lamps of pure crystal. In the middle of the cave was a table, and on it were dishes of silver and gold, set with pearls and rubies, and drinking horns of ivory, and one cup of diamond, carved with birds and beasts and fishes, so cunningly made that they seemed to move as Ellen looked at them. As for the music, Ellen had never heard anything like it before. It was like the wind in the branches, or the sea beating on the shore, or the cry of a bird in flight, all of these and yet none of them. Then a voice began to sing, and Ellen did not know whether to laugh or cry for the beauty of it.
"Oh, I cannot bear to leave this," she whispered.
"I cannot go back to blind Selsig again."
"You cannot stay with us, Ellen,"
said the king under the hill.
"In a little while you will be longing for your home, but you may take anything you desire. There is only one condition. You must never tell any other mortal being what you have seen here, until you have spent every penny of the wealth which you carry away with you."
Ellen promised willingly. She looked at all the wonderful things in the cave and tried to decide what she should take. If she took one of the dishes or the treasures on the table, then she would never be able to explain where they had come from without telling of the kingdom under the hill. But if she took gold from the heap by the door, then she could spend it secretly, and no one would be curious. And so Ellen took 2 handfuls of gold pieces, thanked the Goblin King as politely as she could, and went away up the passage, back to the hillside. As she stepped out onto the grass, the stone moved back noiselessly and covered the entrance to the cave, so no one would ever have suspected there was even a wormhole there. The sun was sinking low in the sky, and Ellen could see the bucket still standing by the well in the distance. She ran down the slope and soon had the water safely in the buckets, ready to take home. But first she made a little hollow in the ground at the foot of the thorn tree and hid the gold. That night she pretended to fall asleep as soon as they went to bed, but Mary was anxious to know whether Ellen was giving up the visits to the well, and shook her until Ellen had to admit that she was awake.
"Have you seen anything yet?" asked Mary. "I don't suppose the goblin will come out to meet you. You're too grand."
"Well, he did, so there," said Ellen indignantly.
"I saw him, and his cave, and all his treasure."
And then she stopped, horrified, realizing that she had broken her promise.
"I won't say another word," she told Mary. "Never."
And with that Mary had to be satisfied. Ellen lay awake for a long time, worrying about her hasty words.
"But he can't know what I said," she thought to herself. "He couldn't possibly know."
The next afternoon, Ellen insisted on going to the well. She thought that if she saw the goblin, she could explain that she had not meant to betray his secret. She hurried down the path, but there was no sign of the little man. Instead, just as she reached the stones by the water, she saw a big snake curled up on one of the stones. First it hissed at her, and then uncoiled itself and darted at her like an arrow from a bow. Fire flashed from its mouth, so sharp and furious as forked lightning, leaping round Elen like a cage of flame. She gave a little cry and fell unconscious to the ground, where she lay for a long time. It was late when she reached home again. A mother asked her where she had been, and Elen told her of the fairy snake and its attack. Some of the farm servants were sent at once to look for it, but although they moved every stone by the well, there was no trace of the creature anywhere, nor was it ever seen again. When Elen had recovered from her fright, she went to the hawthorn tree where she had hidden the gold. But although she looked everywhere for it, the treasure had gone, and Elen was no better off than before she met the goblin. Yet, when she told the story to her children in later years, she could never be sure which she regretted most, losing the gold or leaving the strange fairy palace of the King of the Hill with all its wonders. "For gold is too soon spent," she would say, "but the kingdom of the fair folk is something to remember all of one's life." The White Lady of Pwll Gwenllian. When William, Duke of Normandy, came over to England and defeated King Harold at Senlac Field, he brought with him a number of other knights to help him in the battle. These knights were fiery, warlike men, and once William was King of England, he began to be afraid that his followers might try to overthrow him and take the kingdom for themselves. So he allowed them to go to the far west and try and conquer their own kingdoms out of the lands of the Welsh. These knights were experienced fighters and cunning men, and after a while they succeeded in conquering most of Morgannwg and driving the princes who had once ruled it into the mountains, while they lived in comfort on the rich farmlands below. They built castles, and soon towns grew up around these towns like Cowbridge and Neath and Bridgend. Only one of the Welsh princes was allowed to hold a lordship like the Normans, and this was Caradoc ap Iestyn, Lord of Afan. Though Afan, the land between the River Neath and the River Afan, was a rocky, mountainous country itself, the lords of Afan built a castle at Aberafan, and as time went on, houses and shops and a church were built in the shadow of the castle. Now the rest of the Welsh lords had to find homes where they could, and one of those, whose name was Pwll, went to live at Pencastell, a few miles from Aberafan in the valley of the Afan. Pencastell was the top of a hill, and it had been a fort for a tribe called the Silures many hundreds of years before, when the Romans came to Britain. No doubt Pwll built himself a wooden hall on top of the hill, and perhaps he built a wooden palisade around his hall as a defence in case anyone attacked him. There he lived with his wife and their little daughter Gwenllian. And as the years went on, Pwll's wife died, but Gwenllian grew up to be the most beautiful maiden in the whole of Morgannwg. Life at Pencastell was peaceful enough. Gwenllian learned to spin and to sew and to know what herbs cured illness and what herbs were best for cooking, and all the lessons that a prince's daughter needed to know in those days. Sometimes when other lords came by, there would be feasting, and Pwll's household bard would sing songs of battles of long ago, and all the old warriors would swear to rise and drive the Normans out of Morgannwg. But by the morning they had forgotten what they swore the night before, and Gwenllian was glad, for she did not want her father to go away to war and perhaps be killed. Yet sometimes Gwenllian grew tired of the quiet days at Pencastell. "Please, father," she asked, "let us go to Aberavon today. Ivor the shepherd tells me there are travelling entertainers there, with jugglers and a dancing bear. We might need fresh spices for the kitchen."
"Very well," said Howell. "We will go and visit our cousins in the castle, and I need a new sword from the armourer."
And so they went. And it was on one of these visits that a young Norman knight first saw Gwenllian and fell in love with the beautiful girl. He went home to his father's castle and said to him, "Father, I have seen the most beautiful girl in all of Morgannwg, and I want her for my bride." "Who is she?" asked his father. "Is it the daughter of Turbeville of Coity or Granville of Neath?" "None of those. She is the daughter of Howell ap Caradoc, the Welsh prince who lives at Pencastell." "What?" roared his father. "A Welsh girl? Why, she doesn't even have a dowry to add to our lands." "I don't care about lands or money. I love her for herself alone," said the young knight. His father was very angry at this, for he wanted his son to marry a Norman girl, the daughter of one of his friends. Yet the young knight was so miserable without Gwenllian that at last his father agreed to help him. He sent a message to Howell. "You are to send your daughter to Black Castle," ordered the messenger. "My lord commands it. His son is pining for the girl."
"Send my daughter to a Norman castle? Never," cried Howell. "I would sooner die and have her dead at my feet."
"My master will not be content with that answer," said the messenger. "You had better consider the matter again before I leave." But Howell was determined. He thought of all his kinsfolk who had been killed or exiled by the invaders, and he thought of his gentle Gwenllian, and he knew that he could never let her go to the cruel, treacherous Normans. The messenger went back to his master and told him of Howell's answer, and by now the young knight had taken to his bed. He was so sick at heart without Gwenllian, and his father was angrier than ever. "I'll teach this stubborn Welshman that he cannot refuse me. Gather my soldiers together at once. If Howell ap Caradoc will not give me his daughter, then I will take her from him." And the Norman lord prepared for battle. Now Howell had many friends, and long before the Normans came within sight of Pencastell, Howell knew they were coming, and even how many soldiers the enemy had. He had sent all the women and children away from Pencastell into the hills, all except Gwenllian, and all the cattle and the sheep and the goats, and even the hens, so the Normans would not find them. Then he ordered the men of his household to strengthen the palisade around the hall with logs and earth and stones, while others carried up barrels of water from the river in case the siege was a long one. Weapons were placed ready, and Gwenllian prepared to care for anyone who was wounded. Then they waited for the Normans to come. But first Gwenllian went to Howell and said, "Father, this danger is because of me. I do not hate the Normans, though I fear them for their cruelty. Yet, if it will save the lives of these people who are our friends, I will gladly go to the Lord of Black Castle as he commands." The men had heard Gwenllian's words, and now they cried out, "No, no, do not let her go." And Howell was proud of them all, both his followers and his daughter. Meanwhile the Normans had come to the foot of Pencastell, and their master sent his messenger once more to demand that Gwenllian be given to him, and Howell refused, and the two sides prepared for battle. It was a long and bitter struggle. The Normans were heavily armed, and they were skilled warriors, used to this sort of warfare. Yet the sides of Pencastell were steep, and the day was hot, and they did not find it easy to cross swords with Howell and his men. And as for Howell, his walls were not strong even after they had been shored up, and the Normans managed to set the wood on fire with burning arrows, so the Welshmen spent as much time putting the fires out as they did fighting the enemies. Gwenllian stayed in her father's hall at first, doing what she could to help the wounded. But after a while the wooden hall itself caught fire, and after that she stayed by her father's side, protected by his shield. "I should have sent you away," the old man told her, as he watched the enemy preparing for yet another attack. "You would have been safe with your cousins in Aberavon Castle."
"I will not leave you, father," said Gwenllian. "I care nothing for my life if you are killed. But I wish that so many others need not die for my sake, Welshmen or Normans. Someone will weep for each of them, I know, as I would weep for you."
"There is no way of preventing what fate decrees," said Howell. "We must only try to meet it as bravely as we can." The battle went on from early in the morning until the evening, and though the Welshmen fought well, slowly the Normans climbed the hill, then crossed the barricade, and at last surrounded the survivors of Howell's men as they made their final stand in the burnt-out ruins of the hall.
"Wait!"
called the Norman lord as his soldiers moved forward to finish the fight.
"Is Howell ap Caradoc there?"
"I am," said Howell calmly. "What do you want of me now?"
"You have fought nobly, almost as well as a Norman. Give me your daughter now, and I will spare your life and those of your men."
"Never!" cried Howell, and his men with him. Gwenllian crouched at her father's feet and stared bravely at her enemies. But she wanted to weep for all those who lay dead around her.
"So be it," said the Norman. "Kill them all, except the girl, and bring her to me."
At that Howell roared in fury and raised his sword. "Better to die cleanly now, child, than slowly in a Norman dungeon," he said. And before he could bring the sword down, an arrow caught him in the throat, and he fell dead. Gwenllian staggered back in despair, and then hid herself behind a pile of fallen timber, while the Normans rushed forward and slaughtered all the Welshmen who were still alive. When the battle was over, the Norman soldiers were so busy seeing to their wounded and stripping the dead of their valuables that no one noticed Gwenllian slip away down the hillside towards the river. Down she hurried, until she thought she was safely hidden in some bushes beside the cool, singing water. Up on the hill behind her, the Norman lord was shouting at his men to find her at once, dead or alive. But Gwenllian took no notice.
"Oh, father," she said to herself, "if I had never been born, you would be alive now. The Normans would not have seen me, and 50 men would have not have ended their lives like this, and 50 women would not be mourning them."
She looked down at the river as it flowed past her white dress in the water, and the stream washed with red blood of the dead all over her skirt as it went by.
"The water takes away every stain," she sighed. "It is deep enough and quiet enough to take me too. No one else shall die for my sake."
And she slipped softly into the depths of the pool and was gone forever. And that was the end of Howell and Gwenllian. But it is said that Gwenllian's gentle spirit does not rest altogether peacefully. In times of danger from flood, she appears by night, dressed in flowing white robes to warn of the danger. Howell's ghost has been seen too, an old man with a crown on his head, armed with a sword and breastplate, who guards a treasure buried under a garreg fawr, the stone that marks his grave and that of his followers. And as for the Norman lord, well, no one even knows his name. The Green Lady of Craig y Llyn. If you go beyond Glencorrog nowadays, you will find that the hills lie under a sea of pine trees, part of the great forest of Coed Morgannwg. Deep in this forest are two lakes, Llyn Fach and Llyn Fawr, and over them towers Craig y Llyn, the rock of the lake, a cliff nearly 2,000 feet high. Before the trees were planted, this was a bleak country, full of strange legends. And one of the strangest of these was the tale of the Green Lady of Craig y Llyn. Few people lived near Llyn Fawr. Only the occasional shepherd or farmer would go there, searching for a lost animal, perhaps. Yet it was said that once every 7 years, anyone who happened to be near the lake there could see a beautiful maiden dressed all in green, with jewels of green that flashed like fire. The fairy, for such that she was not a mortal creature, and would sit on one of the rocks, making herself a chain out of the berries of the rowan tree. She would gather the fruit in her apron before sitting down with a lapful of bright red berries to begin her work, her long hair falling round her like a golden waterfall. But some told another story, of a strange being, half woman and half fish, who would sit by the water combing that same long golden hair until she sensed that someone was watching, whereupon she would dive into the lake and vanish without so much as a ripple. Boys who played at tossing stones into the water from Craig y Llyn told odd stories too, of invisible hands that caught the stones before they reached the surface of the lake. No one knew of any evil that the fairy creatures had done, but all agreed that Llyn Fawr was not the safest place to visit. Now, near Glencorrog there lived a young shepherd called Gwyn, and although he was poor, he was a strong worker, and served his master so well that the farmer gave him each year at lambing time the choice of one lamb for himself. After a while, Gwyn had a small flock of his own, and began to think of buying land and setting up as a farmer himself. His parents were growing old, and Gwyn dreamed of building a cottage where they could all live together, with a cow and a pig and a few hens in the yard for his mother to watch over, while his father sat in the sun and carved the wooden spoons and figures he loved to make. But one day a pack of savage dogs set on Gwyn's little flock and killed every one, sheep and lambs together, and that was the end of Gwyn's dream. For even if I work hard and earn myself another flock, it will take so long that my parents will be lying in the churchyard before I can make a home for them, he said to himself. He was so sad to go back to that poor hut and tell his mother and father what had happened. Instead, he walked up into the hills towards Craig y Llyn until he found himself close to the dark waters of Llyn Fawr. Above him the clouds raced across the sky, throwing patterns of light and shadow onto the bare moorland. But Gwyn did not notice them, or the birds singing high up above the cliff top. Then suddenly he heard a sound, a stone clinking at the water's edge a little way away. He looked up and saw a girl, the loveliest creature that he had ever seen, dressed all in green, in robes that flowed and swirled about her like the waters of the lake when the wind stirred them. She was so beautiful that he felt he must speak to her, though he guessed she was not a mortal, but a spirit of the lake. "Wait for me," he called, for she was moving away to the far side of the water. "Please wait. I must speak to you." And he began to follow her along the stony shore. At first the lady did not give any sign that she had seen Gwyn, and went on as before. Then Gwyn began to remember all the strange tales that were told of Llyn Fawr, and wondered if he should run away before he came to any harm. "Though I've never heard of anyone being injured," he thought. "But fairies are strange creatures, and I don't want to get carried off into the land below the water. I might not be able to breathe the air down there." Just then the lady turned and smiled at him, and beckoned to him to follow her. Her smile was as radiant as the sun when it comes from behind a dark cloud, and yet as gentle as moonlight on a snowy field, and Gwyn forgot all about the country under the water. He hurried after her until she stopped by a large boulder at the lake edge. "Well, Gwyn," she said in a voice that sang like water in a clear stream, "you are not afraid of me, then?" "How could I be afraid of anyone so beautiful?" asked Gwyn. "Beauty is not always good. Remember that," said the lady. "The flowers that bring healing are not always the brightest, and the viper wears a finer coat than the slow worm." "But I don't think your beauty has any evil in it," Gwyn told her. "Perhaps that is why so many people fear this place. They are afraid of goodness." "Perhaps," said the lady. "At any rate, no harm will come to you here. And I have a gift for you." She held out her hands towards him, and Gwyn saw that they were full of bright red rowan berries, the fruit of the mountain ash. "Take as many as you can hold in one hand," the lady told him, "and do not be afraid, whatever happens." Gwyn reached out and took a handful of the berries. No doubt the lady believed she was helping him, he thought, but he knew only too well that fairy gifts do not last, but turn back into withered leaves as soon as the fairies are gone. Still, she meant well, and so he thanked her. "Your thanks are welcome," she said. "Put my gift to good use and do not waste it. Then I shall be thanked indeed." "I will do what I can," promised Gwyn, and put the berries into his pocket so that he would not drop them. Immediately there was a clash as loud as thunder, and Gwyn covered his head with his arms to protect himself, and when he looked again, the lady was gone, and Llyn Fawr lay dark and silent in the sunshine. "Well, at least I have something besides bad news to tell when I get home," Gwyn told himself. "I must hurry now, for the sun will be setting soon." He had not gone far before he heard something clinking in his pocket, and felt something heavy bumping against his side. "What now?" he sighed. "Have the lady's berries turned to stone or lead?" He felt in his pocket, no berries, but a number of hard, round, flat objects. He pulled one out. It was a gold coin, and so were all the others. Gwyn could scarcely believe his good fortune. He looked back at Llyn Fawr, but the evening mists were already rising over it. All the same, he waved his hand and called, "Thank you," before he set off to his home again. Gwyn's gold never turned back to berries or withered leaves. He bought the small farm that he had dreamed of and lived there with his parents. And one day he brought home a wife, not the prettiest girl in Glencorrwg, but certainly the kindest and the gentlest and the most diligent in caring for her family. Yet when Gwyn looked into her eyes, he would smile, as though remembering, and when she asked him why, he would only say, The colour of your eyes reminds me of the waters of Llyn Fawr when they shine in the sunlight." And with that, she had to be content. The Green Lady of Craig y Llyn is only a fairy tale now, but men have worshipped the spirit of this lake for many centuries. Some years back, a large hoard of weapons and tools were found in Llyn Fawr, and it is believed that they were cast into the lake as a sacrifice to its goddess over 2,000 years ago. If Gwyn's story is a guide, when she was a kindly deity.